of the Can Diversity Collective's Inkwell Beach Live, being brought to you from New York and LA. I'm holding it down in New York for the LA crew that's out there enjoying, lovely sunshine, I hope, today. This is our session called This Is So Dope. And I'm going to credit Jason for giving me that title, because when I asked him to participate in the panel, he's like, this is dope. I was like, I'm going to use that because it's so relates. So this is a conversation about the cannabis industry. This, I guess it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now that is growing leaps and bounds. And I want to talk to some of the key leading marketers in this industry who I've known from different sort of areas in their lives and, positions in their career. And I want to talk to them about what was their decision to decide to move over to the cannabis business. Some people say it's still a weed business, but what did you do? What was the thought process? How that happened? What's the difference in marketing a main brand versus this kind of brand? How do we grow? What are the growth sectors? All of that. So I'm in it, but I'm listening to the experts, and I'm really excited to be here with my friends. I'm going to start with Jason because he looks like he's on the screen with me to the right, and he's a man in the room, so we'll defer to you first, and we'll let you say hello first. We have Jason White, we have Tai Beauchamp, and we have Ericka Pittman. So Jason, you're up first.
All right.
Give me kind of give everyone who's watching the rundown of how you got into this industry, just kind of, what you've been doing and where you are now.
Okay. I spent most of my career in advertising and marketing. I spent 15 years on the advertising agency side. 10 of those years were at Wieden and Kennedy. I spent about 6 of those 10 in Shanghai, lived there twice, 3 years each. Always a Nike guy throughout that time, helped launch Wieden Shanghai and helped launch Nike for the Beijing Olympics. And then after some time in Shanghai, I moved back to LA, took a job with Beats by Dre, who was my client. I went client side, went to work for Jimmy Dre, Omar Johnson, Luke Wood, and spent about 5 years there. And throughout my career, I had always wanted to work on brands that had a social purpose. I think I had always kind of played in this space successfully and unsuccessfully, but always felt a responsibility there. In addition, I've always kind of been involved in diversity and inclusion. I'm on the board of Marcus Grant Project, mess with Tiffany and AdColor all the time. And, it was a chance as a marketer to look at a space that was it was becoming time for brands. It was becoming time for storytelling. It's becoming time to provide narratives for consumers to make choices. At the same time, I looked at that space and saw there's no way we can step into a space like this without acknowledging what has happened to our community, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a hand-in-hand decision. And when I went to work for the Select brand, their number one brand on the West Coast, and it's a vape brand, and they were on board for both. They said, we really want to bring in a marketer who can really drive us and make us a big brand. And at the same time, they completely supported our efforts and my desire and their desire to drive into the social equity space and the social justice space. So I jumped. As I tell people all the time, I was Thanksgiving dinner, 2017, I think, something like 2018. And 2017, I told my parents I'm leaving Apple. And I said, I'm leaving Beats to go into cannabis. And they heard I'm leaving Apple to sell weed.
Right.
So that took a minute, but it's been a good journey. We were acquired 6 months later, and now I'm a part of the Curaleaf company. And we're the largest cannabis company in the world now.
Oh, and they think differently about that decision now, I'm sure.
They do. They're coming around.
Ericka, you're below me in the Brady Bunch window. Tell me, give me your story. Give it to us.
Yeah, my path to cannabis was a little bit serendipitous. I literally got a call out of nowhere and had a conversation. I didn't even know who Al Harrington was. I'm like, I don't smoke weed. I don't know if I could do this, but okay. I've always been intrigued by the category. I was just saying earlier today, I've been watching cannabis for about 11 years. Cannabis got intriguing for me in the 90s when I noticed chemotherapy patients were being prescribed cannabis, or weed, if you will. And I said, marijuana, excuse me, that was the technical term. And I said, Wait, is it legal or is it illegal? I don't understand. Like, why is it a little bit legal? And it started to really intrigue me about how America was approaching, you know, this drug, if you will, right? And people around me were being penalized and, you know, criminalized around this product. But at the same time, we were offering it to terminal patients or patients fighting, you know, cancer. And so it just didn't make sense. And so I've always watched it peripherally. And I think over the last 10 years, I got really curious once it became legal in Colorado. And I had originally thought about moving to Colorado. I'm like, that's not real. That probably can't happen. I'm just waited out a little bit. And then in recent years, I started to really think about economy and, you know, surges in economy. And when we think about most of us that are, I think, watching this, remember when the World Wide Web sort of came about and the economic impact of the digital revolution, digital evolution. And I was like, you know what's the next big boom in America? Cannabis. We need to get involved quickly. And so when this opportunity came up, the reason why it made sense for me personally was twofold. Viola is already a brand. And when you think about brands versus products in this space, they're far and few between. So I was excited about the work that Al had done to date, and the opportunity to scale it was really, really appetizing for me. And the second piece of that was the purpose work. The brand is named after Al's grandmother, Viola. And so the reason, or the ethos with which he launched the company, was just so heartfelt and authentic. And the work that he's doing for Black people in the world and in the community of cannabis was so inspiring. He had me at hello. I was like, I have to come be a part of this movement. So that's sort of how I got here.
All right, great story. We're going to touch back on a few of the points you just brought up. So I'm pinning them in my mind. Tai. Hi, Tai.
Hi, Adrienne. Well, thank you so much for having me, because, you know, I think to share the stage, one, with all of you, individuals I know and admire both personally and professionally. Ericka and I worked together many years ago at Vibe, and spent considerable time together. And my path to cannabis is, I think, as Ericka said, serendipitous. For me, it was unexpected, but also an industry that I looked at for some time and had a lot of intrigue about, having been a beauty editor and working in the wellness space and always being a storyteller. But I think particularly in my case, being a storyteller of intention and with purpose, and wanting to share stories that were going to be uplifting and supportive of wellness and wholeness. We like to call it wholeness at Brown Girl Jane, as we center women of color specifically. It was serendipitous. I have been an entrepreneur for 14 years. I was talking to Jason as a friend, like, you know, I'm trying to figure out what's next, where I'm going, loving the entrepreneurial path, but also wanting to put my muscle behind something that was going to be impactful for community, and especially for women and women of color. And learned about Brown Girl Jane. As people know, I host television, I produce, and I do a myriad of things. And storytelling, as I said, is really at the center of it. But last year in particular, I was at this crazy intersection on a plane more than 180 days, exhausted, couldn't sleep, anxious, trying to figure out whether or not I was going to stay in LA, whether or not I was going to go back to New York. And our Spelman sisters, Malika Jones-Kabete and Nia Jones, who are also biological sisters, had started working on developing this brand. And they reached out to me to say, look, we want you to try the brand. We would love to know what you think about it. I don't even think they were thinking at this point that we're bringing in Tai in this capacity to be a co-founder. It was officially announced that I joined the company as co-founder in April, even though I started working with the company back in January. And I tried the product. Now, I must say, moving to LA, I had more experience with cannabis than I had previously living in New York. And my intrigue around the business was, as Ericka stated, the opportunity that it presents to us as people of color, and Jason and I spoke about this, in terms of closing the racial wealth gap. Knowing what prohibition did for alcohol in the 20s, seeing that this was a potential model for that, and if we could be involved on the front end. But particularly with Brown Girl Jane, here we are, 3 Black women founders who developed this brand, CBD, no THC, which we'll talk about, yes, really to support the wholeness and the wellness of women of color. So there are wonderful founders and quite a few women and people of color founders, including Al, in this space. But we expressly said we want to help women of color on their journey and their wellness journey, because as a category, wellness was not something that was accessible for Black women. We were not going to Pilates and yoga because we were taking care of our grandmothers and our aunties and our mothers and the kids. And so how do we make this palatable to us? And so as I was traveling and tried the plant, I was sleep deprived. I think I was traveling from DC to Qatar, and they sent me the product, and I was like, I got sleep. I felt less anxious about getting on and off the plane. I was like, this is transformative. And I felt clearer and I felt more centered. And it was then that I said, listen, I don't know what you were trying to do with sending me this product, but I would love to be a part of this movement. And so we are centered on community. That's our foundation. We create content to really bring in conversations for women of color about their wellness and their wholeness journey. And we look at the products that we offer at Brown Gold Jane. We have 5 SKUs currently as really a part of the toolkit to support women on their wholeness and wellness journey.
Great. So thank you guys for kind of the foundation and the stories of each of your organizations. But let's just do a quick level set in terms of definitions and meanings and what it is, this business that you're in. So we've heard THC, we've heard CBD, we've heard weed, we've heard marijuana, what is this business? What is it? Give us some terms and terminology definitions, please, so that, our people know what we're dealing with. And any one of you can answer that.
I can maybe frame it from the very, very top, which is what is cannabis, what is hemp, what is marijuana. So cannabis is an all-inclusive title. Marijuana, anything with more than 0.03% THC is considered marijuana. Anything less than that is considered hemp.
And the THC is what?
THC, so a flower has what's called cannabinoids. And there are over, I think, 120 cannabinoids in a plant, 130?
100, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And THC is just one. CBD is another one. THC is the one that has the psychoactive effect. There's THC, CBD, CBG, CBN, THCV, THCA. There's a lot of different cannabinoids in a plant, and we're just scratching the surface on what they do. I'll maybe pass it on to you guys if you want to keep going it from there.
Well, I can jump in here, and thank you, Jason, for that frame up. The other thing is the human body has a cannabinoid system.
Yep.
So what happens is each of those individual cannabinoid breakdowns that Jason took you through affect the body in a different way. So like a CBN, which is derived from the CBD side of the plant, it affects your sleep. So if you get a hemp product or a THC product that has a sleep effect, it usually has a CBN element into it that gives it more of an effect on your system. The easiest way to break it down is THC is sort of the psycho effect. The psycho effect, and then CBD is the physical impact on the body, like almost like the medicinal impact on the body.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I think it's just really also important, and Ericka touched on this, that we all have an endocannabinoid system that helps to regulate how we sleep, how we respond to anxiety, how we respond to stress, all of those things that happens naturally. So while THC and CBD are 2 of the highest cannabinoids that are studied, we have more information about that, but the studies around our endocannabinoid system are just beginning to kind of like grow. And so a lot of this information is still being downloaded. But I think for us in particular with Brown Girl Jane, why it's so important, it's because, as you said, there are all these stigmas attached to understanding marijuana, cannabis, THC, CBD. And we recognize that in our community, especially with women in particular, we have to help educate them that it's not getting high. Not that it's anything wrong with that, but it's not getting high when we're talking about it from a wellness and a wholeness perspective.
Sure. So, I clearly just learned something about cannabinoids and then the endocannabinoids, which exist in my own body, which never knew. So thank you. As Tony Baker say, I never knew. You watch him and listen to what he said. So we have the foundation of what that is. And then we do understand too that, a part of this business before it became, I guess, so commercialized to the public, it was criminalized for the use, and primarily, Black people, and many of our Black men right now are in jail for marijuana charges. And now we see this industry has transformed into one that is making people, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. How are we balancing this thing of, being criminalized, and now it's something that's used openly? You've got weed shops, their designer strand, all of this. How are we reckoning with this division of, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, the classification that makes it different and criminalized for one group and not for another, and how it's being used too?
Well, there's a lot of work to be done on that. And I think particularly in legislation, and it starts with just us understanding. I know for us at Brown Girl Jane, and we're very small. As I said, we're 6 months old. There are 4 people, or actually 5 people on our team, including the 3 founders. So we're doing our small part to start, but we recognize, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to enter this space. That's part of the intention. One, to be an example of Black women, really helping to shift the narrative, creating opportunity for ourselves, but while doing that, also being very intentional about our give back to support the community, and educate the community, and then also advocate. So a portion of all of our proceeds, and of every single sale, goes to support Black women and women of color in their mental health and wellness. Currently, we just launched our recent product, our skincare product, our hero product, Glow, which is a CBD facial serum, and proceeds are going to Until Freedom. And so we're choosing to be active in our engagement in the community in that way, and also encouraging other young people, and especially young Black women, to consider this as an industry. And it doesn't necessarily have to be as a product developer or a dispensary or owning a farm. It could be, being an attorney or a marketer, and just ways to become involved. So that way we can help really drive new legislation around this. But I'm sure Jason and Ericka have a lot more that they're doing, obviously because of the size of their organization and their capacity at this point.
Yeah, I think if I can jump in, purpose is the ethos of our work. We have a 3-pillar approach to our consuming audience, and that's plant, purpose, and people. So obviously the plant is first and foremost, just getting people to understand, our positioning in the marketplace as a premium plant producer. And also the heritage around our brand. A lot of people don't know we've been around for 9 years, and that we are a multi-state operator, and arguably the largest African-American owned multi-state operator. And all of those highlights are fantastic, but the purpose work is the part that we're really rooted in. And I recently launched a division called Viola Cares in February. And that initiative is focused on education, entrepreneurship, expungement, and incubation. So those are our 4 core pillars. And education for us not only means sort of how to use the product, like what I think we were talking about a little bit earlier, but ways to get involved, to educate yourself around the specificity of the business and where legislation is going, and how to arm yourself with the penal code rules around cannabis, which are changing every day. Entrepreneurship is just what it sounds like. It's creating spaces to provide self-growth opportunities from an economic standpoint. And then expungement, I think, is a huge part for us, because it is beyond my scope of comprehension how cannabis can be recreationally legal in a state, and people are still dealing with felonies on their records for the very same thing that people are now billionaires behind. So we're working very diligently to figure out expungement solutions on a state-by-state level. And then incubation, I think, is sort of the juiciest bit, because capital constraints are the biggest hurdles in the cannabis space. So having enough capital and enough runway to successfully launch the business, and then to that end, being able to effectively run a business, I think is one of the biggest challenges for Black people and people of color. So incubation is a huge part too, figuring out ways to subsidize new and burgeoning businesses within the space.
Wow. Jason?
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I think to go in the order we went is very interesting, because you've got Tai, who is, really at that grassroots level and building a business, and then I think you've got Viola, where Ericka and Al are really the leader coming out of the Black community, but they just make dope flower regardless. I don't care if it's a Black brand or a white brand, whatever. They make dope products. So respect to y'all. I'm forever trying to get Al. I'm like, Al, give me some tansy. Give me some tansy. You know, and then you've got where we come in, which is Curaleaf, and we're about to close a transaction which will make us like the largest cannabis company in the world. And I think, you know, we're a company that's 10 years old, that is, you know, always been built from the medical side of the business, the wellness side of the business, always based on improving lives. And I think in the last sort of year, they've really gotten serious about trying to figure out the role we can play and the role we need to play in evolving this conversation. I think, you know, it's not easy in the marketplace because, you know, to what you said earlier, Adrian, it's like, oh, these billionaires and these millionaires, these companies are not profitable. You know, these companies are constantly raising money. These companies are constantly in, you know, the financial grind. And I think for our business, it was really important to us to really start to make that move to figure out how we can support social equity. So we brought on a woman named Khadija Tribble, who's been in this game for a very long time, very experienced, like from the community of cannabis, from the community of social equity. And she's been my partner. She's our VP of CSR, and we've been building our social equity program. We're hopefully going to be announcing that fairly soon. And it, you know, for us, it's like where we do have capital, you know, where we do have real ability to help people stand up businesses, where we do have the ability to help, you know, at scale, change lives. That's what we're trying to do. How do we find the ideas that scale across states, that scale into really creating wealth in communities, but that build business for us and for them?
So you all really talked about, you know, and I found it interesting too, that you focused on the purpose, you know, and giving back, you know, with this new industry, which, you know, apparently is relatively new. Your company is 10 years old. Ericka, you guys are in your 9th year. Tai, you're in year one. You're still building, right? Just year one.
We're toddlers still. You're but toddlers. We're growing.
So there's still, I guess there's still growth opportunity, or still opportunities within the business in this industry. And I think the initial thought was all about the dispensaries, kind of that entry, or having dispensaries, having, you know, land to grow the product. What are the barriers, or what are the entry points, if you will, to get into the business? What's still left? Are there price points based off of individual levels? You said, you know, some of these organizations are still raising money. They're not profitable yet. But they still haven't gone out of business either. They're still raising money. Like, what is making people invest, and what can I do? Somebody like me, if I were like, I need to get into the weed business, what would I be doing? What would you recommend?
You know, that was a really loaded question, Adrian. I want to take a stab at a few points you made. First and foremost, I think very similar to the spirits industry, it's important to understand the process of, you know, seed to sale. Right. So what is that process? So, you know, there's a cultivation space, which is, you know, phase one, and then there is a processing phase, then there's a distribution phase, and then there's a dispensary phase. Right. And so, you know, getting licensed, and Jason can probably speak way more eloquently on this, is there are 4 ways to get licensed in cannabis, pretty much. Right. And, you know, you may want just to open up a retail space or a dispensary, or you may want to get into the agricultural side and grow, and it can be an indoor or an outdoor grow. But be that as it may, more times than not, those are all capital expenses. And anyone that has any experience in business, you understand CapEx is a huge, huge consideration, right? Because a lot of times it's a huge upfront investment, or it's taking on some significant debt, but it has a long-term, you hope it has a long-term effect on your profit margins, right? And so, most people don't have enough capital to really invest from a CapEx standpoint, but B, you know, is the business going to thrive and sustain itself for you to be profitable? The second end of that is, from a cultivation standpoint, it's agriculture, it's a plant. You know, so it can get really fickle, you know, like the plant may not harvest properly. You may get a bad crop, you know, so there are all of these moving parts. And so you have to really decide what part of the business you're most passionate about if you're not fortunate enough to be Curaleaf or Viola and getting all facets of the business, right? But then, Dia Sims and I were on a panel earlier today, and she said something so profound that supports what I've been evangelizing is, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And so there are all these ancillary businesses in and around cannabis that don't require licensing and don't require you to sort of be an expert in cannabis to be able to maximize on the culture of the industry. Dia was talking about the gold rush in California and how, while, few folks, made their legacy wealth from actually finding gold in California, but really it was the ancillary businesses like Levi's or Wells Fargo that became these huge businesses that resulted out of a function of the gold rush. So, a jean company who made dungarees so people can dig the gold, here we are, right? You think about in Colorado in 2009, 2008, there was a huge surge in real estate. So, real estate went 4x, I think, year over year from 08 to 09, because obviously cannabis became legal and everyone was, rushing there to kind of build their businesses out. So there are a lot of different ways to get in and make some good money.
Yeah, we say plant touching and non-plant touching a lot when we talk about the businesses in cannabis. And the non-plant touching businesses are everything from packaging, supply chain, rent, banking. There's so many other parts that are not plant touching that are opportunities to be in the business.
So another thing, I've gone to a few sessions and they talk about that very thing, like there are various entry points from the plant touching and non-plant touching. And even as it's being traded as like a commodity on the stock exchange, are you guys familiar with how to properly invest? Where should people invest if they're investing on that level? Like, how do you get in to talk about different points of barriers of entry into that? And then you couldn't invest in the US, but maybe if you invested in Canada, that was possible. Yeah.
That might be a Jason White question. Wow. For the largest cannabis company in the world.
I was gonna.
Well, my first answer would be invest in Curaleaf.
I was gonna say just buy our skincare, just buy our tincture. That's how you can invest right now. Become a part of our community. But Jason.
Well, I think, and again, I'm a marketer. I'm not a finance person, and luckily, I'm surrounded by incredible finance people. But I think, like any industry, you've got folks who are still raising, angel raises, and who are still looking for seed rounds, and who are still very much in that aspect of entrepreneurship, right? And there are communities that you can tap into to find access to kind of who's trying to raise money. And then, on the real kind of retail level, there's what we would call MSOs, multi-state organizations. A lot of them are publicly traded. They're traded in Canada. We are one of those MSOs that's publicly traded, and we love when our stock is traded. And I think that it's been a very rocky, speculative business, and a lot of the green rush as it happened, and all of the capital raises and all that, created a sort of a bubble, if you will, in the marketplace. And I think in the last 2 years, with one, just seeing that bubble naturally sort of deflate, and then seeing what happened with the vape crisis and seeing what happened with COVID, there's been a real balancing of the marketplace. So I think, again, not a financial guy by any stretch of the imagination, but those are kind of like the different pockets. Then you can also buy funds. You can buy cannabis funds and balance out your investing.
The other thing too is, there are rounds. I think I heard Jason say that people are in their C rounds of financing, right? And so there are, friends and family rounds, angel investor rounds, and there's A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. Hopefully no one ever gets to a F,
X, Y, Z
round of finance. Right.
Z.
But there are opportunities to get in at the friends and family and angel investor level as well. So, brands like Tai's brand, I don't know if you guys are in an investment stage or a fundraising stage, but, tapping into some of these smaller burgeoning companies and thinking about ways to procure equity with lower investment points in big bets. I mean, obviously they're riskier, but there are opportunities for everyday folks that may not have a ton of capital to get involved and invest at a passion level.
So there's Tyra,
I was just going to pick up on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would love to pick up on that. I think the passion level investment, and what's been so humbling for me, because as I said, I'm very new to this industry. I'm a storyteller and a marketer and a brand person. And it's been wonderful to just see also that there are so many small Black owned entrepreneurs in this space who are making a way for themselves. And again, driven by purpose, where I think that there is an opportunity to see who they are and see how you can potentially invest in them to scale. We personally, right now, are not, and we're self-funded and are grateful to be at this point as we continue to grow the business. But I do think, to Ericka's point, that's a wonderful way to get involved. And, you know, it takes a certain amount of foresight because obviously in this stage and in this phase, you're investing in the founders more so than anything, because there's still so many unknowns about this industry because regulations are still evolving. But again, I'm in the CBD business and not the THC, which is a little bit different in that way. And then obviously for us, because we are a skincare and a wellness brand, ingestibles, our regulations are still very stringent, but different.
And if I could maybe expand on that or actually throw it back to you, Ty, I think it's important for people to understand what happened with CBD and what happened with the FDA and give people a sense of clarity around what is the CBD market right now. Because it's not something that's exactly what it seems.
Yeah, I mean, because the regulations, you know, the studies haven't always been done, right? So there's still so many studies that are unfolding right now about the efficacy and whether or not you're talking about a tincture as an ingestible that's regulated by the FDA. And then obviously you have topicals that work in a different way for your skin as cosmeceuticals. So there are just so many levels and regulations that you have to understand, and the plant works differently also. So it's very, I don't want to say, I wouldn't call it, it's not volatile, but it's still evolving. It's still very much an evolving space.
And to that end, I think one of the unique things as marketers that we have to stay mindful of is, because this is an evergreen category, right? It's living and breathing every day. The rules are literally changing. Like, we have to read our compliance rules for each state weekly because they change that fast. We've had so many, packaging hurdles because we're printing one set of compliance rules, and literally 4 weeks, 5 weeks later, they change, and we've ordered 150,000 pieces. And so there's all these unique things that go into, building a business around an evergreen category, but also the consuming audience is constantly changing, right? And so when you think about cannabis and the stoner community that is the traditional target audience, is radically different from the people that Ty's now trying to, to introduce into the space. And then there are these kind of curious consumers that are looking to understand more and figure out which lane works for them. What is that psychographic? And how do you engage them and tell your brand story authentically to connect with those people? So there are a lot of moving parts to building a successful brand in this space.
But to that end, I think that demonstrates and illuminates the fact that there are so many different ways and different opportunities to have different touch points with different types of consumers who are interested in the plant.
So I think it's really good that we do have a well-rounded, panel that you guys are touching on each one of these pieces. I'm so glad I pulled it together like I'm so glad. Brilliant. But, so I hear too, like Ericka, you mentioned the regulations. It sort of puts me in the mind of like a pharma business, like a new drug that, pharmaceuticals go through and, they have to know all the rules and regulations. It has to be FDA approved, and then it gets wiped out because something didn't go and you start all over again. So it's a very touchy, situation in business. So,
and then it's even more nuanced because we're not federally regulated, right? So this is literally a state-by-state legislation you're talking about. Wow. So, like, for instance, even as intricate as Michigan, for the most part, is recreational and medicinally cleared, right? Mm-hmm. Legislated. But Detroit is only medically legislated. So there's no recreational legislation in Detroit as of yet. So if I'm in Ann Arbor, I can do one thing, but if I'm in Detroit, So the municipality level is even a level of interest in some states. So it's just very fragmented right now. And, you know, a lot of people don't realize this. The other bit is you really can't cross state lines without a, you know, license to carry with cannabis. You can literally, if you go to a state that's not legalized and you're carrying cannabis recreationally, you can be penalized even on a petty, you know, a petty drug charge. Right. As a consumer. So there's so many, you know, moving parts to it right now, but I think that's all going to change in the very near future. So we'll see.
You know, and I think as a marketer, you know, a lot of times when I talk to my team or talk to my boss about it, it's like, because we're this big brand, we're in 17 states, we have 57 dispensaries, right? But, you know, people want to see this kind of national thinking and national brand, and it's what we're working towards. We're building with Select, we're building a national brand. With Curaleaf, we're building a national retail chain. But it's not really like running a national business. It's a lot more like running a global business.
Right.
I think about when I was at Beats, it was like, okay, if I'm launching a headphone in the UK, France, Germany, China, Japan, Australia, North America, those are all different consumers. Sport and music are in different parts of the culture and the society, and different degrees of technology, different degrees of price sensitivity. That is cannabis. That is Florida, New Jersey, Connecticut, you know, Maryland, Michigan, California. Yeah. Medicinal, not medicinal. You know, what technology is there? You know, what are the regs in the state? Like it is really like running a global market within the U.S.
Well, it's like we use this term. As we come up with policies as it relates to diversity and inclusion for the global brand that I work for, creating global consistency, but with local relevance, right? Is there some global consistency as it relates to this industry? And then how do we dial it down so it's locally relevant? And it sounds like that's what's happening in a way with, you know, the legislation on municipalities and states of how to even operate. So, you know, how do we get everyone on one accord, but still works for their individual, you know, markets? Is there some strategy that people are thinking about as it relates to marketing this? Anybody?
It's so well, I don't want to answer that. That's for them. But it's so interesting just to hear. Because their space is a little bit different than mine.
In addition, Ty break up
Canada,
which is very a little Ty.
Ty, we close this up.
Okay, am I back? Back?
I can hear you, but yeah.
I was just saying, this is a question for Jason and Ericka. I said, but what I wanted to point out was the fact that this is why for an industry it's so important that they have to have like the area of lobbying, right? In order to try and get some consistency across the board. But for us, even as a wellness and wholeness company, we can't ship our product to Canada. So there are still some regulations that doesn't allow us to be as global as we would like to be. But this is fascinating for me to hear, Ericka and Jason.
I've had a lot of experience with a very similar dynamic in spirits. And if you look at prohibition, and I've said this, I'm literally hoarse, I say it so much, but prohibition's only 88 years old.
Wow.
Right? It's not even a lifetime ago that spirits was illegal in this country, right? And so when I think about, you know, people with the question around federalizing cannabis, I think it's going to happen a lot sooner than people think it will. But what ultimately ends up happening is because at the state level it happens first, as the global nation, if that's a thing, as the nation regulates, there are these nuances on a state by state level that will remain no matter what. So for instance, you can't give a thing of value in Chicago, not Illinois, Chicago, that's more than, I think it's $1 with spirits. That is not the case in New York. That's not the case in the rest of Illinois. So I think as the industry continues to evolve, there will continue to be these, I love what you said about global consistency with local relevance, Adrienne, that I think we'll all get used to as experts in the industry. But it also comes down to, you know, your product mix and, you know, how consumers consume those products. So for us in Colorado, concentrates are huge for us. We're like one of the top brands for concentrates in Colorado. And while we do okay for concentrates in California, our flower is paramount here in California. So how do I tell a flower story and a concentrate story at the same time, And that's the part that's been the biggest challenge for me.
Wow. Jason, you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I couldn't agree more with what Ericka had to say. And I think for us, that's something that we're trying to really take on and lead. Like, we are trying to figure out how to build the first national brands and how to formulate products, right? That taste the same, that have the same effect no matter where you go. Because I can't make a product in Florida and then ship it to New Jersey or ship it to wherever. Like, I have to make the Florida product in Florida. I have to make the New Jersey product in New Jersey. I have to make the California product in California. So you still have to get to consistency, because that's how you build brands, right? If I tried on a Nike in New York and then I tried on a Nike in Chicago and it was a different Nike, I wouldn't buy Nikes, right? So I'm trying to make sure that when you try Select in California and you love the Maui Wowie or what is this one here I have? This is not a plug. Like Lemon Tree, right? The Lemon Tree in California, I want the lemon tree to taste like lemon tree when I try it in New Jersey. Or is there even a lemon tree in New Jersey? Because it's all about cultivation. This is agriculture. Maybe I can't grow lemon tree in New Jersey. So it's a really, really fascinating time to be in the business. It's a fascinating time to be on the verge of legalization, but maneuvering underneath that and trying to figure that out and trying to find the lanes towards national brands, towards nationalization, while you await the actual legislation to actually get there.
Wow. So what are some of the factors? It is an agricultural business, so obviously, I guess, location, where you grow, the weather, that all affects this business. Has COVID-19, because that's what's happening globally, has that affected how any of you guys are doing business? How do you foresee, once we get out of this, what will be the change in how you guys are operating now versus then? Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm kind of fortunate in that way. I think the one fortunate part of being the smaller guy for right now is that it's a little different for us. We've been really fortunate. Our farmers have been amazing. What we have been most affected by, quite frankly, has been shipping, because we're a direct-to-consumer business. We don't have any retailers right now. I think in terms of COVID for us, pre-COVID, we were having conversations with hotel groups about, going into retail that way and other retail partners. But since we're direct to consumer, what we've been challenged by is really just shipping, and the delay in getting product there has been a problem for us. But fortunately, our farms and our fulfillment houses and all of that, and our manufacturing process and supply chain is secure right now.
Excellent to hear.
It's been interesting for us because we were, the cannabis category was deemed essential, which was fantastic. So people could still get access to, in most states, can get access to their medicine, if you will, particularly for medicinal patients. So that's been a plus. I think the biggest challenge for Viola is because, I think I talked about our 3 Ps, so plant, purpose, and people. The people part is a huge part of why we're so successful, right? We've been able to create an experiential connection for this brand with our consumers, like literally touching them and face-to-face contact. And so, the absence of that with COVID has, I think, put a little hindrance on our awareness conversation. But socially and digitally, we've been able to do some really dynamic things, which, quite frankly, has socialized the brand at scale, to Jason's point, figuring out messaging around our purpose work, which is not flower forward. So we can talk about, Viola Cares in a way that we can't necessarily talk about the plant. And that's a national conversation. And we've been able to do that successfully through social and digital platforms. And, we're figuring it out. I think this is the new normal, even the way we're doing the inkwell here, right? Versus last year. So, I always say through devastation comes evolution, right? So, you have this ridiculous situation, you figure out a way to kind of rise to the occasion and do something new and innovative. So I'm hoping that, the industry can recover quickly, but we've been adjusting.
What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. I think for us,
absolutely,
what we realized as soon as COVID hit, to echo Ericka's point, first of all, the fact that it was deemed essential was a huge step forward for this industry, a huge step forward for this planet. And I think you're going to see that in a lot of the state legislative decisions that are going to be coming in the next 2 years. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the national conversation, but I think it will deeply affect the upcoming legislative votes. And I think that, we really realized right from jump that this industry had a huge way to go digitally, and it was a foot race to catch up. Everyone had to go to delivery. Everyone had to go to, some sort of digitized process of ordering, of curbside pickup, of all of those things. Just people had to revolutionize their businesses quickly. And I think for us, I'm really proud of how Curaleaf handled COVID-19. One, we managed to keep almost all of our employees. Two, we managed to keep almost all of our employees safe. And then I think when you looked at other industries, we were even able to help transition people into our industry. So folks who lost their jobs in the restaurant business, we hired into, working in a dispensary, or drivers who weren't driving for Uber, we brought them in to become delivery drivers. So we tried to actually help continue to do our part and fuel the economy. Additionally, on the Select side of the business, the team did a phenomenal job of, Select is a lifestyle brand, right? So the difficult thing is in a pandemic, when you don't want to market yourself, how do you still be a lifestyle brand? And the answer is your actions are your marketing, right? So what we just showed up for our dispensary partners, because we're a wholesale business, right? We had lunches showing up at dispensaries. We were giving away couches to people stuck at home. We were just being in the moment and trying to do what mattered for people at that moment in time. And I think because sitting at home and a lot of people furloughed, laid off, cannabis consumption was up, and I think for us to be able to be a part of that narrative and to give people a little bit of, release was a good thing for us, a good thing for the brand. While on the Curaleaf side, it was, we're an East Coast medicinal brand. People needed their medicine, and that the conditions didn't stop because COVID arrived. So for us, it was really important to continue to deliver for our patients.
So it seems like you all learned the art.
Adrian, I want to just add.
Yeah,
but I just want to add what is fascinating, and again, because I know Jason and Ericka both personally and professionally, it's just fascinating to hear from the biggest brand to another big brand to that we're people centric and community centric, and that was really what drove me to join Brown Girl Jane. I'm a celebrant of women and believe in sisterhood and that connectivity, and so when you asked about this idea of COVID, I just realized we birthed a content platform, You Good Sis, which is an IG live show that we have twice weekly, where I've hosted conversations with Sarah Jakes Roberts and Yolanda Adams and Angela Manuel Davis, just to name a few, to really check in on how we're doing. And so what I love about what is happening, and obviously there are marketing and brand benefits as a result of that, but being centered on people, because that's what this plant is ultimately, right? It is a support system. It's a part of the toolkit of wellness and wholeness, whether or not you're enjoying THC or CBD. And so it's really refreshing, I think, even as an industry and as people consider joining this industry, to recognize that, while there is commercial opportunity here and enterprise here, what you're hearing again and again is the connection to people.
So, if we focus back on the people and we go back to something we mentioned earlier on in the conversation, and it's about, the people that are, still in prison over, an element of this drug. Are your companies doing anything to help those people, or is anyone working with legislators for policy purposes to make sure that these people are kind of integrated back into the community? And I even thought, there are always incentives given to organizations who help the people out. And perhaps if we were to, as a reentry point, it's just my thought of maybe give these people who are in jail with felonies on their record a job at these cannabis companies who are doing the business that they were doing in some form or fashion, as a reentry opportunity. I don't know if government gives credits for hiring, quote unquote, ex-felons, but are you guys doing anything like that to help reentry?
Absolutely. We, Viola, we launched a partnership with Root and Rebound. Their website is rootandrebound.org, and they're a fantastic not-for-profit organization that actually supports reentering citizens. And so individuals that have been previously incarcerated for felony convictions, we are working with that group. They provide legal clinic services. They provide research and information, and they also provide facilitation for reacclimation. So literally finding housing, in some instances registering to vote, job placement and different things of that nature. We're developing a toolkit called A New Leaf, and it is to support reentering citizens that have been previously affected by cannabis-related convictions, and helping them to understand not only how to get back into society, but how to break into the white market cannabis space. So we've been working with them and collaborating with a lot of different brands to support them. We just recently partnered with TI to do a collaborative capsule collection in celebration of 420, and percentage of those proceeds go back to Root and Rebound, and a few other initiatives. And a few of my colleagues, maybe perhaps one of them actually on this screen, and I have been huddling and brainstorming about ways to create scale around education programs and certification programs, particularly for felons. I do think that as we continue this expungement initiative, because so there's one thing about the people that are still incarcerated with recreationally legal cannabis dynamics, right? That's horrible. Let those people out of jail. It's ridiculous, right? But then there's this whole other dynamic that we're not really focusing on, and it's the notion of this expungement. So it is like, okay, I have served this time. You cannot give it back to me. You are now making millions, if not billions of dollars off of this same industry, and I don't even have to inflate. I can't even start from scratch. It just, something has to give. And so figuring out legislation around expungement has been a huge, huge part of our effort to date.
Love that. That is great to hear.
When I joined the Select company, as I said, the founders were really, really supportive. So one of the first things we did was we actually brought on Carrie Twigg, who was just a lovely human being who really helped myself, and we brought on Mike De La Rocha from Revolve Impact, and we really started the concept like what is a 501c3 that could really help with that very topic. And we launched a program called the Possible Plan. We launched it last August. We launched it actually with 1619 New York Times. And it was the whole concept is just to change the narrative. So we do that. And again, this is a separate 501c3. It's not a part of Select or a part of Curaleaf, but I do sit on the board and I'm a co-founder. And we've expunged 450 records in Baltimore, and we've done another probably 100 or so in Portland. We've had 3 expungement clinics. I think there's a 4th one that was supposed to happen during COVID, but that couldn't have happened. We do a lot around building the actual narrative of what happened, and letting people understand, the true story of the war on drugs, the true story of the last 100 years in cannabis. And for those who are watching, I tell everybody, watch Grass is Greener. Fab Five Freddy produced it. It is a phenomenal film to understand what really happened in cannabis and how it weaponized, how it was used as a weapon against the Black community since the 20s. Okay. Wow. And, we've worked really hard to sort of put Possible Plan in the light to do more. We've been hit really hard with COVID. It's really hard to raise money right now. But putting that aside, what Curaleaf is doing, as I said before, like we are about to really push out a social equity program that we think is going to scale. We're excited about that. We're still, really trying to get the details right and trying to find the right way to do it. We are having great conversations with some of our friends and trying to, really find out how do we help be some of the fuel and some of the scale and the footprint behind a lot of these great activities.
So I'd like to hear the idea of partnerships and you guys trying to work together,
Absolutely.
This circle. So what's the competition like? Are there, what's the competitive set, if you will, in this business? Who are your main competitors?
There are levels.
Wait a minute, I just looked at Jason.
There are levels to this.
Exactly.
We are, none of us are competitors right now. And that's
we're good. We're good.
So you guys, you can really support each
family.
other.
Yes. Yes.
You can support each other. So we have to make sure, and that more of that is happening. Like, everybody's connecting within the community and helping. And are there viable partnerships that, are there more companies like Ty's company that can be supported by you guys? Or is there some group, that they could connect to figure out new ways? I mean, essentially, this is a new sort of entrepreneurial venture that it's a new sector of business, if you will. One thing is dying, but this is opening up. What opportunities are there for other companies like Ty's company to get involved?
Well, I can answer that just from my perspective. I always call cannabis the first 21st century industry. And I think while we know there's a tremendous legacy, and we know there's a tremendous amount of things that we have to address, it is really the first industry that was truly formalized and legalized in this century. And I think there's, without a massive past and without a lot of things you have to undo, you can kind of build this industry by looking around and learning from the industries around you and learning, like, what did other industries do right? What did they do wrong? What do you want to borrow from? Who do you want to steal from? And what do you want to put in place? Now, because it is such a capital intensive industry, and because there's, so much work to be done to make these companies, to help them prosper and help them grow, you can't do it all. But I do think that, you are seeing, to answer your question of who are our competitors, like we're a multi-state operator. We compete with other multi-state operators, GTI, there's, Acreage. So, but I think you are seeing a lot of these holding company type formations happening. So someone like Ty, for example, she's got a great product. She speaks to a very, very valuable consumer, and she has a niche offering, that she can easily help fill out a portfolio from a bigger company that doesn't have the resource or the authenticity to go speak to that consumer. So that's where we have to really look at, the strengths of what all these different players do. And I think sometimes, when I think about what we have to do to make this industry successful, and also to make, to really turn this around for Black folks, is this is an ecosystem, right? We need some people out on the streets protesting. We need some people in the boardroom protesting. We need some people in the bank accounts. We need people at every stage doing this work. And that's what I think this group represents. And then you also still have those, like, minorities for medical marijuana. You have like Cannaclusive. You have folks doing all types of work. I mean, Cannaclusive started because when you Google Black person cannabis, all you get are pictures of people in jail.
Wow.
So they started just by offering a whole new set of free images to the web, so that you could actually get Black people hanging out smoking cannabis, right? Because all you would get was dudes with hands behind their back locked up. So like, there's so many parts of this ecosystem that we all have to push forward, and we all have to do our part. So, there's room for everybody in this thing.
People of color, I think it's important for us, whether or not we work in organizations that are representative of that segment, or we are able to educate and expand the purview around this segment. We have to be creative about how we can join forces to tell a different story for Blacks in cannabis, right? And so any way that I can help Jason, obviously within the guise of, what's compliant and or Ty, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to give each of them access, and even you, Adrian, so that we can continue to expand our presence. It's 82% of the owners in the cannabis space are Caucasian, and less than 5% are African American. Like, that's a problem. And so as we can continue to evangelize for expungement and, this sort of base level entrepreneurship, we also have to do a really sobering job of staying together and having the power in numbers as Blacks in this category, and helping each other's businesses out.
I think you just kind of charged me with a new.
And I just want to add to that.
Oh, I was just no, go ahead, and then I'll say what I was going to say. Go ahead.
No, go, Adrian. This is when I become the host. Go, Adrian. No, I was just going to say, in being new to the industry, my business partners, Malika and Nia, I will tell you, we have been so welcomed into a community. There are other people that play in the cosmetic space, in more topical space, because we just have one skincare product. But, we've spent time with Mary Pryor and Cannaclusive. Like, it has been a very collaborative environment, and it's been wonderful to experience. And I think it's because of what the point that Ericka made, that there are only 5%, Black owners in this space and founders in this space. And so we see this as an opportunity for our community, and to have the social impact that we want to expunge, but also to, as I said, to narrow the racial wealth gap that exists.
No, I love that conversation. We are at time, believe it or not. I think we could keep this conversation going longer. I hope you guys have enjoyed the conversation. Ericka, you almost inspired me to become an inclusion and diversity director, leader of the cannabis industry, making sure that more.
We need you.
Please, we need you. Please come aboard.
Into the industry.
Join us.
We have we have to fight to have more of us in multiple industries. And I think if nothing else, now is the time to make sure that we all have opportunities. We all have spaces to be and to participate and not have these barriers. And one of the saying is, never let a good crisis go to waste. We are in crisis mode now with the whole COVID, this racial thing, but there's opportunities being thrown. There are these gestures, that have been given to us, these opportunity gestures that have been given that we can take advantage of now. So I just want to thank you guys all for joining the conversation. It's been enlightening. We're going to run this again so more people can experience it. So take this as the recording of the broadcast that will go out. So Jason, Tai, and Ericka, thank you for the work that you are doing. I'm impressed, I'm inspired, and we look forward to, just learning more and watching each of your businesses grow. So I thank you again, and everybody that's been watching, I hope you enjoyed this session. This is the last session of the day. We have a DJ coming up afterwards to play music for us for about an hour just to help us rock on out. But this has been a great day at the Can Diversity Collective's Inkwell Beach live session. Hopefully we will see you guys in the south of France next year so we can do all of this live. We'll love progress.
Please.
We'll have products. We'll have sampling for everybody.
Creativity to recognize as well.
Exactly. So thank you.
Exactly.
We have comments, very informative. Somebody said this is energizing, and so I love that. So thank you guys, and we will see you next time. Come tomorrow. We have a special guest, Gabrielle Union. Is going to be in the same time slot that you guys were in. Her family was the first family, literally, of Inkwell. So that's what we affectionately call them.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we had her, we had Dwayne Wade, we had, the baby, we had everyone at our space. So they are the first family of Inkwell. So we hope to see you guys tomorrow. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay sane.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you.
Bye, ladies.
I'm so happy I got to see you guys.
I know.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.